Hello, everybody. Hello. Where's Ben? Oh,
And Cash.
Come join us. Cash. Everybody, Cash. So I'm going to talk really freaking loud, and I don't think anybody's going to need a microphone, and I'm thinking I'm loud enough that the sound system can actually, yes, it can pick up my voice. So, hi, welcome. This is the community discussion on the security team. Security team was a little busy about 2 weeks ago. If you haven't updated your site yet, you should leave this room right now and go and do that. Everybody good?
Everybody
Okay.
updated their site?
That's great news. So, honestly, I was going to make nice, pretty slides for this, and then this thing happened, and I didn't make nice, pretty slides. And I was told I didn't have to have nice, pretty slides. But I have really good documentation on Drupal.org that I will be flipping through as I go over this. So, the agenda today is we're going to talk a little about what we do, how we do it, where we work, and then we're going to have a lot of time for questions. I'm sorry?
I think they're talking to each other.
Oh, if they're talking to each other, then I don't need to listen. Awesome. So, the Drupal Security Team is a team of all volunteers. I say volunteers because they volunteer to be on the security team, but a lot of them, their companies pay them to cover their time working on security issues. So they are volunteers from the security team perspective, but in most cases, their companies are on board and supportive of them doing this work. We cover all of Drupal core. I think people are familiar with that product, and most of the contrib world. If you're running a contributive module that has the covered by advisory tab on it, pulling up a random page now, let's see how, internet is fast today. So if it's got the shield, sorry, I've got the pointer. Yes, let me pull out my physical shield. The pointer's not going to help with the recording either. Okay, I'm going to skip on the pointer for now. So I think everybody can see the shield. It really does not do nice color mixing here. But projects that have a shield are maintained and covered by the security team. In theory, if there's a security issue in these modules, they get reported to the security team first. We will work with the maintainers to solve the issues. So typically what will happen is a security researcher, sometimes the maintainers themselves, sometimes people who aren't security researchers, but just people in the community, find a security issue. Maybe it's in views, maybe it's in core, and they report it to the security team. And then there's some vetting that goes on. Is this a valid issue? Is this an actual security vulnerability? Sometimes it's more along the lines of a security hardening. Sometimes it's just site configuration issue. I can write full HTML when I'm logged in or when I'm authenticated as a basic user. Well, you can do that because you check the checkbox for the input filter, not because there's a security vulnerability. We then will vet it. We then talk to the maintainer of the code. If it's Drupal code, we will reach out to the core maintainers and we will work with them on finding out what the issue is, figuring out what the patch for the issue is, and eventually on a Wednesday, releasing the information out into the wild. We do this by publishing security advisories. It's great. Live demos. So our output is mostly this page here, where we have where we publish security advisories. Most of these are all very formulaic. We have a different page for contributed projects. And they pretty much all give you some basic information. What is the project? What is the date of this advisory? What is the risk? We're actually going to be spending some time working on redoing the risk calculations at some point in the near future. What's the description of the problem and the module itself? And apparently my last pass is having issues. And how do we solve the problem? Which is almost always upgrade to the new, the latest module. Our security advisories are actually now getting full issue credit. So if you report an issue to us, you will receive issue credit through the normal issue credit systems for your security work as well, which is helpful to people on the team as well as people reporting things to us. Any questions before I continue? Okay, I'll have time for questions at the end, but I like to parse things up. So what happens if you find a security issue? How would you go about reporting a security issue? You think you found something, you're not quite sure. The easiest thing to do is when you're on a project page, there will be a button labeled Report a Security Vulnerability. And if you click that button, you'll either be routed to one out of two places. You'll either be routed to the private issue tracker, which I'm not going to click on this because this is being recorded and might show things it's not supposed to show. Or you'll be routed to the public issue queue, and it will fill in a tag of security issue for you. If you're routed to the public issue queue, it means that the maintainer has not opted in to security coverage for their project, and so the vulnerabilities get disclosed publicly. If you get routed to the private security, yes.
You could open this page in an anonymous browser window, and then it would be safe to click on it, I think.
If I do that, it's going to prompt me to log in.
You can't log in.
And I don't have a demo account to log in as. I'm going to just, sorry, video people. Okay, so this actually is not a problem to disclose. So when you click on this and you're routed to the private issue tracker, you're going to see something that looks a little bit similar to this. You're not going to see the follow-up date field. That's an internal mechanism. You got the issue metadata. You're not going to see some of these fields. We hide some of these fields from you. And then at the bottom, you get a text box to fill in what the issue is. This is just like the public issue queue. Tell us what the problem is. Give us the steps to reproduce. We fill in some text for you, and then you just submit the issue like any other issue. If you're routed into the public queue, it is the public issue queue, and they all look very similar. Yes? Okay.
It's fine.
Did I?
No, you're good.
Okay. So that's reporting an issue to us. We like it when people report issues to us. If you're ever on the fence, like it might be a security issue, but I'm not quite sure, go ahead and report it to us anyhow. We'll let you know not only if it is or if it's not, but also how we came to that reasoning. So there's a little bit of an education process going on there. If you think you found like, a really big major security issue, then definitely report it to us. We have a lot of policies and protocols defined. I'm not going to read through everything on this page, but one of the things that I do want to talk about is how you might join the security team. There is a formal application process for joining the security team. It's outlined here. We're making all the security team members sit up here, those who decided to come. Come, join us. Here. Welcome. So, joining the security team, the process to join the security team is pretty easy. It's an email. There are some requirements that we'd like to have you have met first, and they're somewhat outlined in this document. And so you can read through what those requirements are. If you meet like 90% of them and are missing one, go ahead and apply anyhow. Anything you want to add?
Why would people want to join?
Why would you want to join the security team? Because we're a group of really cool people. Let's see what happens. You get a free hat. We ask for hours of your labor, and in exchange, all you get is a lousy $10 hat. It's actually really rewarding. When I joined the security team, there was a bit of imposter syndrome going on, working with some of the people who I was working with, and the team, and this is the people who are currently on the team. The team is just a great, wonderful group of people who really care about security, and unfortunately, this team does a lot of the work it does in private. Unlike everything else in the open source world, pretty much what we do happens behind a closed website that is, for obvious reasons, hopefully hard to gain access to. So different perspectives are really helpful because, not all of us are site builders. In fact, if you go through this list and ask most of these people when the last time they built a site, I see people squinting. Most of the time when they last built a site, most of these people don't build multiple sites for the most part, with some exceptions. Do you build sites? Not anymore? Okay.
But I'm probably most recent.
You're probably most recent. You build sites.
I do.
Okay, so,
So I'm not most recent.
and I build sites, but Ben has a site. Two sites. Ooh, two!
His blog.
Yeah, his personal blog. But is that in Drupal? Oh. So, security team is a fun group of people to work with. And so that's why you might want to join the security team. The other things that we'll talk briefly about is, what is this page? For people who are new to Drupal, when we look at, the number of advisories that we release, let's skip 2018. Let's go back to 2017 for a second. In 2017, we released 97 items. We released 97 issues in 2017. Ooh, sorry. I'm sorry? And that doesn't include the core issues. In 2017, for core issues, we released, this is where slides are helpful, we released 4 issues. So you might look at this and be like, is Drupal really secure? That's like over 100 things you guys published about in a year. Like, is that a good thing? Really? A good thing? And the answer is we're somewhat unique in this. We go on the side of being cautious. So yeah, we over-publish issues. Every single one of these is a known issue in Drupal that we fix the problems behind. Keep in mind that we are covering massive amounts of contrib space. So of those 97 modules, some of them are modules like views and ctools. Some of them are modules that you've never heard of because they're in use by 100 people. But if the maintainer opts into the security team coverage, we will cover the code for them, and we will help them with the advisory process. Anybody else want to speak? They're not a loud group.
I would say, so 2 things on why you'd want to join and sort of what skill sets are useful to join. As a security team member, sometimes you're like fixing issues, and sometimes you're helping just find issues and coordinate the release of issues. So if you are very technically savvy, you might like the former of those, actually like getting into the code and really understanding the vulnerability and helping the maintainer or working on core actually fix the problem. And other times you might just want to help the process along. And so you don't have to be like very deep in the internals of Drupal to help the security team or be a member of the security team. So all different types of skill sets are useful. Documentation writers, people writing code, people managing process, project managers and the like is all useful. The second thing I would... Testers. Yeah,
testers.
Absolutely.
Testers are good people.
The second point I want to say on why you should opt into security advisory support for your project. So it's an opt-in process. So as a maintainer, you can choose for your project to be covered by the security team. That's a good signal to send to people that want to use your module. So or your theme or whatever your project is. If you opt into security advisory status and coverage, you're telling people, when you download this project and use this project and there's a security vulnerability found in it, the security team will help ensure a safe process to fix that vulnerability.
The security team uses a process that's broadly known as responsible disclosure. And so that's the process that we follow. Now, not all maintainers, not all projects need security coverage. And so we recognize that. The original rule on this is if you had a stable version, we would cover you. And so as soon as the maintainer cut a stable version, sometimes without realizing that cutting a stable version actually opted them into security team coverage, we would start covering them. And so you'd end up with projects, I think Bad Judgment for a while had security team coverage. We ended up with projects that, intentionally really should not have security team coverage. So we added a functionality in here for opting in. So as a maintainer, you have to explicitly opt into being covered by the security team on new projects. And so that does a bunch of signaling on the project page. It also does signaling on the report a security vulnerability button where that actually takes you as affected by that. And then we still require the stable release. We're not going to cover an alpha release of code even if you've opted in. And so if you look on project pages, some of that signaling is there. You can see that this 7.x version has the shield next to it, but these 6.x versions do not. Drupal 6 is no longer supported either by the community at large or by the security team, having said that there are some vendors who are providing support for it. But the security team itself will not provide coverage for Drupal 6 because, well, how long ago was that? 2 years ago? Year and a half?
Yeah.
It was a while ago. Any questions? Let's open this up. There's 15 minutes left. Let's take questions. Can you come up to the microphone? Because I'm being told by people that that's important thing.
I can. I'm just. Oh, sorry about that. I'm just curious. When we do code reviews in house, it would help if there were examples of the types of security issues that you guys find, so we could train some of our developers on here's what not to do, or here's what has been done in the past that you shouldn't do anymore. Is that something that somebody or the security team might be able to provide? Just examples of mistakes, or
There's handbook pages on how to write secure code. What I tell the students that my day job is at the University of Michigan. What I tell the students is they should actually go and look at the vulnerabilities in question. So here is EXIF module. We can see that this was fixed in 1.1. So go look at the code diff between 1.1 and 1.0. And it will show you exactly what was changed. For security releases, especially in core, slightly less so in contrib, we're pretty good at saying, in your security release, we really only want you fixing the security vulnerability. Sometimes maintainers sneak, a couple other little bug fixes in there, but for the most part, security fixes fix just the security vulnerability. So if we do this together, this is EXIF, so we can go and take a look, and we can say, browse codes repository, and we want 1.1, and let's see if it'll generate the diff. And I can't read that quick enough to figure out what it's doing, but it's doing things. You'd have to go back and read what the vulnerability here is, and then you could figure out what's actually going on. But that's pretty easy to do with a lot of modules. Cross-site scripting issues are probably the most common in Drupal. Cross-site scripting issues are probably the most common in Drupal, just not escaping Drupal filters on output. And so just not escaping output and allowing code to get in there. It's more Drupal 7 than Drupal 8. Drupal 8's done a lot to fix that issue, but most Drupal 7 issues by far were cross-site scripting.
So Ben would like to volunteer his time.
I am Cash.
No, it's Ben's project.
So one example is definitely to look at the security advisories, do the diff of the code, and understand the vulnerability there. There's no library of bad code. I think that'd be an amazing thing to have for our project if anybody wants to develop that. Maybe
Come talk to
snippets
us.
or bidder things. That'd be useful for so many things, individual developer training, or even automating different static analysis tools or the like. So library would be amazing. What we have right now is the security advisories and doing the diff. There are some projects out there that are intentionally vulnerable that are available for training or for, mostly just for training. So
Yeah.
there was a project, and I'm not sure where these resources at. It was called DesignZ. There was some
Craig
GitHub
write one?
pages. Yeah, it might be linked from the how to write secure code. We'd have to find some of the
We will
links,
update
so-
the issue node for this session with
Yeah.
links to those resources.
It's only D7 though, so if
It
somebody
is only
wants
D7.
to start an
Yeah.
initiative to make a D8 thing of this, because in non-Drupal space, there's Metasploitable, WebGoat, a number of other sort of tools used for training and testing. I think it'd be a great initiative to have something like this for Drupal.
If people are interested in working on this and can dedicate resources to it, please see me afterwards. My email, I'll put my email information up here in a second as I open up TextPad to put an email address in here. There we go. Slide. Anybody else? Yes.
So what's their process for doing the work that you do? Do you have regular meetings? Do you have an open Slack that you're always watching? And how much time do each of you put into this every month?
So our tool set revolves around a Drupal site known as security.drupal.org. There is a Slack channel. There are regular-ish meetings. And the time range really varies by member. There are some members who put in quite a lot of time, and there are some who put in less time. And so I think it averages probably about 10-ish hours, 10 to 15 hours a month, barring something not happening like 002, which was a lot more time from a lot more people because it was a fairly large endeavor to go through and do that work.
So I just wanted to point out that like I got looped in for a very, very small thing, which was writing the advisory, but I saw how much effort and time was going into that one meeting and how everyone was spending hours just getting that one advisory out. And I think a lot of us might just take it for granted, like, oh, there's an advisory, I have to update my module, but like, wow, the amount of work that went out behind the scenes, and not everyone gets to see that. So that was really incredible for me, and I wanted to get that on recording. Thanks.
Just to follow up on the process question about what the security team does, a lot of the work is triaging. So there are reports that come in about vulnerabilities, and security team members are assigned a 2-week time period to handle triaging, which basically means validating, is this a security issue that we need a private security advisory process to release a fix for. So somebody might report a vulnerability in a bit of code that doesn't have the project maintainer hasn't marked it for the security advisory process or security team support. So that would disqualify it, or if it's a development release, or there's other qualifications. So
Or it's not a vulnerability.
or it's not a
Yeah, it's just
vulnerability.
a misunderstanding, or we also get bug reports reported to us privately. The triage aspect is, so the life cycle of an issue is give me 1 second. The life cycle of an issue is it comes in. At least one person looks at it for triage. If that one person thinks that it's probably valid, another person probably looks at it again just to make sure they didn't miss anything. And then it gets assigned to somebody who kind of shepherds it through the rest of the process. And so at that point, a patch is developed to fix the issue. That's typically the responsibility of the maintainer to actually develop the patch, not the security team members. Now, in some instances, the maintainers are on the security team. But for the most part, it's the maintainer's job to work on the patch. A security team member will then look at the patch, look at the original report, and test it. Does this patch fix the issue? Are there any other issues that, with a quick glance over, can we see that there's any other issues like this in the module? So sometimes you'll get reported a cross-site scripting on line 38, and the maintainer will fix line 38, and then you look at it in line 42, 75, 87, all have cross-site scripting issues on it. So we don't want to keep repeat issuing essays, so we'll spend a quick time doing it's an informal review of the contributed code. Then we coordinate on a Wednesday. So we'll talk to the maintainer and we'll say we need to find a time for you to release this on a Wednesday. They can actually then commit the code up to 24 hours in advance. They then tag a security release, and then on a Wednesday, a security team member will publish the SA node, the security advisory node, like this one, and then publish the release, and then approve the automated emails to go out, and make sure the Twitter things happen, which then feeds which feeds all other subsystems at that point.
Yeah, so my question was in regards to DrupalGeddon, the sequel, and I'm not trying to pour salt on fresh wounds. It was just about the PSA did not mention a patch. It said core upgrade. Mm-hmm. And wondering, was that intentional that you did not mention it was just a patch would be available? Just hearing, because it also affects our strategy for it.
So with that, there were a couple things that went into mind. When we issued the PSA, we were not sure we were going to release a patch with it at the time. So we did not want to promise something and then have to deliver on it at the point in the future. The security team's advice is to always do full upgrades. Don't apply patches. Always do the full upgrades, because you end up building more technical debt by just applying the patches. So we ended up releasing a patch, which was, you're not the only one who wanted it. There was a large demand for patches, and so we'll probably continue. I'm not going to commit myself, but for major critical issues, it's helpful to have a patch available. We see that, but on the flip side of it, the process, putting the processes in place when you initially build sites to be able to do upgrades, and this goes back to Teresa's keynote this morning, on we need better tooling around security coverage on upgrades. Upgrades can be hard, so we need to fix problems in both directions.
Michael, can you spend some time and explain us the process of how to get a security shield on a contrib module? Our company basically built a couple of contrib modules, and we have been hitting roadblocks for almost a year, and I gave up even going through that, but probably for the audience.
Just to clarify about reporting, or
No, it's the project application queue is what this is. So There's a lot of technical debt here is the short answer, and I'm sorry for the technical debt that you're seeing from our side of things. The project application queue, which is the official mechanism to get these, got abandoned to some extent when we moved over to doing letting everyone create full projects. And so there was a whole review bonus system in there, and people could get through that. It was not efficient, it took forever, which is one of the reasons why we did this. The problem is that since we did that, all of the resources behind that project application queue have gone away. There have been talks now for 8-9 months of replacing that entire process with a quiz, a test, something along those lines, so that you could, we want to know, do you know what Drupal.org policies are, and can you quickly identify common security issues? That's what we want out of the project application queue. And so that's the longer term vision. The shorter term vision is, for now, just email the security team and let's see if we can get somebody to just go through and mark your projects approved.
Hi. To address the difficulty of installing updates, and also to address that crazy 40-click video from this morning that Dries played of the technical evaluation, what's the likelihood of you guys setting up repositories, standard Red Hat and Debian repositories, so somebody could just do a simple yum or apt get install and get everything up and running, and have packages like unintended updates deal with the updates for us?
Probably pretty slim, because most people aren't, at least from our research, most people aren't using vendor packages to install. If I'm understanding your question correctly, they're not using vendor packages to install Drupal because it doesn't include any of the contributed modules.
Yeah, are you wanting to like apt-get install Drupal?
Yeah, for. I mean, I realize it would be untenable for contrib modules, but for installing the core itself, because that would handle.
Because you want to utilize one of their deployment schemes.
I know Debian does this. Like,
Right.
there's a Debian package maintainer who repackages most, like, not just Drupal, but even some of the contrib space. I'm pretty sure that that's happening.
Well, the problem is, like, you can look at, say, Ubuntu, right? Ubuntu, they're about to have a new release, this month. It's still D7, right? They're lagging way behind. So it'd be lovely if you guys followed the lead of other, Oracle and other folks have done this, set up your own repository so that you grab the core bits straight from Drupal to get the latest, greatest, and follow that 6-month cycle. I think that 6-week upgrade a lot easier to deal with. It's a simple one-line command install.
I'll commit to investigating that as a concept.
I'll also add that it doesn't need to be the security team that does this. There's a lot of community maintained packages. The entire Docker repos for Drupal are not maintained by anyone we know. It's an open source project, and somebody's just doing a pull request against a Docker file.
Sorry, I came in late, so you may have already answered this, but one of the challenges that I see is that especially with the change in the security model, that it's really difficult for and with the number of people that are using GitHub repos to go off and to distribute Drupal modules as well, the security model kind of breaks down for Drupal, because you can't really run a website only with modules that have been approved and are being monitored by the security team. So how do we deal with both educating and prioritizing it so that we can maybe even just favor those modules that have been vetted for security, or compare them, or provide more incentives for people to have taken the effort to take the extra steps to self-select into having coverage by the security team? Because like previously, the assumption was if you pull the module from Drupal.org and there's a bug on the module, you're going to find out when that gets addressed. Right now, you may or may not find out if you're depending on where your information is coming from, and so I think we need to try and think about this as a community to find better ways to communicate and to reinstate the value of just having a basic security model of putting out releases on a regular basis, which it's really fallen down even with Drupal 7, let alone Drupal 8, that people have not been putting out full releases, and it's a real challenge.
So 2 points. One of the things, in order to address that, we should address why people are doing it. Why are people going to GitHub at all? And I think that we could, a little self-promotion here. Go ahead.
Do you mean their project workflow is GitHub based, or do you mean they're actually cloning external code from GitHub.
Oh, I'm totally fine with using GitHub as a repository for doing your development work. That totally makes sense. It's where is the release? Is there
Right.
a release on Drupal.org? If there isn't a release on Drupal.org, then our security model falls down, right?
There's no
So,
control of
and I think both Pantheon and Acquia and others are still putting out the releases on GitHub for projects that they maintain. I believe. I mean, and I think there's others that are doing this as well because it's easier for developers. It's more convenient, but we have to take that extra opportunity to check back into the community and to make sure that we're using Drupal.org for that everyone's using that as the base still, even if your development's going elsewhere.
Am I going back? So there's two sides to this. One is the fact that Drupal.org isn't really what we would think of as Git. Yes, there's a Git server behind it, but that's not the development workflows we're looking at. So, taking this off for a second, come to my presentation at 6 p.m. today on pull requests on Drupal.org. It's a core conversation. Putting this back on. It does fall down, and we as the security team are not going to reach out and force maintainers to follow our processes. In fact, we gave them an option to opt out because maintainers wanted the ability to opt out. So the way to handle this is to put issues in their queue saying, hey, can you guys work with the security team so that you can get covered somehow? There are projects that do the majority of their development on GitHub, but then push back to Drupal.org for releases. So, and from that perspective, we cover them because their Git repos are on Drupal.org as far as we can tell and use and are concerned. And they opt into our projects. But if you're running a module on Drupal.org, then there's not much we're able to, or not on Drupal.org, I should say. We don't have the ability to reach out to you and say, hey, it looks like you wrote a Drupal module. You will follow these rules. And nor would we want to.
One quick thing I'd like to mention is that one of the problems that we have with 100 security releases last year is making sure we don't repeat the same security issues on the same modules again next year. And we can achieve